Joe Biden and the Democrats push harder for stricter gun control across the country. Many are pushing back. OAN America's Hines spoke with Dr. John Lott, president of the Crime Prevention Research Center, to find out more.
What do you make of this recent event, this shooting out in Boulder, Colorado? Supermarket, someone using a gun fired on some people there. A number of people, unfortunately, were killed. What do you make of this development, sir?
I mean, everybody's heart goes out when something like this happens, and everybody wants to try to do something. The question is, let's try to do something that's actually going to be relevant to this case. It's interesting that background checks on private transfers of guns keep on coming up after each of these mass public shootings, but there's not one mass public shooting this century that would have been, even if the law had been perfectly enforced, would have affected any of these attacks. The attack in Colorado already has this law that they want to go and pass nationally. You know, there's been a lot of talk about assault weapons here. If you want to ban a gun based on how it looks rather than how it functions, it's not really obvious to me that that's going to be very useful either in stopping these attacks. Most of the mass public shootings involve handguns solely. And, I just worry that we get off and just try to make it difficult for law-abiding citizens to be able to use guns to protect themselves.
Is that the essential fallacy here, is that people who oftentimes commit these kinds of crimes are violating the law in any event? And when you make gun control laws attempting to directed to prevent this sort of violence, it tends to simply fall upon law-abiding citizens and doesn't really seem to achieve the purpose for which it's intended. Is that essentially what happens?
You may be able to pass a law that disarms some criminals, but if it primarily disarms law-abiding citizens relative to criminals, then you make it relatively easy for criminals to go and commit crimes. And unfortunately, a lot of these laws make it costly for law-abiding citizens to have guns. So you look at the background checks on the private transfers of guns. In Washington, D.C., where all these congressmen are voting on this and senators, it costs $125 to privately transfer a gun. That may not stop you or I from being able to get a gun, but if my research convinces me of anything, the very people who benefit the most from owning guns are the people who are most likely victims of violent crime. If everybody's benefiting, then pay for it out of general revenue. And in addition, if you think these background checks are good, you want to encourage people to go and do the background checks. Is making them pay a $125 fee encouraging them to go and obey the law that you want them to obey? I've come to be convinced over time that the main point that gun control advocates are pushing these things is just to make it costly for law-abiding citizens to get guns. If they were to make a couple simple changes, like who pays for the fees and fixing the mistakes in the system. We heard over and over again that there are 3.5 million dangerous or prohibited people that have been stopped from buying guns because of background checks. And that's simply false. Something like 99% of those are mistakes. And when I was just working in the Department of Justice, I saw data that indicated that the error rate for those background checks is like 3 times higher for Black males relative to their share of the population than it is for other groups. And there's no reason why those mistakes should be there. And there's simple fixes. But the Democrats who are pushing these background checks refuse to fix the cost and refuse to fix the mistakes that are in the system.
Dr. John Lott, the president of the Crime Prevention Research Center, thank you for talking to us on OAN American News, sir.
Thank you very much.
Want to see more videos like this? Visit OANN.com.